I like to look at different sports on this channel, so it's time for some sumo wrestling.
In May 1990, demonstrations in this square in Ulaanbaatar started a revolution that would see the downfall of communism in Mongolia. In English, Ulaanbaatar means Red Warrior, and to Mongolians the name serves as a constant reminder of their country's recent political past. 16 years after democracy took hold of the Central Asian country, the capital city is booming. Nearly 50...
When you think of sumo wrestlers, you don't... Well, personally, I don't think of Mongolia. You think of Japan, I suppose, don't you? And also, Trans World Sports that's done this piece. I remember it used to always be on, I think, either on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning on Channel 4. And it always has the most random sports. But it's brilliant for learning about sports that you wouldn't have really thought about. So hopefully they've got some other really good sports on here.
50% of the 2.5 million people that inhabit Mongolia now live in the capital. Once only politicians were permitted to drive here. Now the city overflows with vehicles. Before the fall of communism, sport in Mongolia was mainly restricted to the nation's 3 traditional pastimes: archery, horse riding and wrestling.
Carl Pilkington, I think it was on his moaning series, where I think he did this Mongolian wrestling, and it was so funny. It was so funny. Check it out. The Moaning of Life, I think.
Of the 3, traditional Mongolian wrestling is the most popular. But since the country began to welcome the outside world in 1990, another form of wrestling has gripped the nation. In Mongolia, sumo is the new sport of choice for thousands of children across the country. They're taking up the quintessential Japanese sport inspired by sumo's only...
These are a lot smaller than the normal looking guys. There we go.
Asa Shoryu is Mongolia's most successful sportsman. The 25-year-old is well on the way to etching his name in the sports history books as the greatest ever grand champion. Unsurprisingly, his success has given aspiring Rikishi in his homeland a hero to idolize.
I admire lots of wrestlers, especially the ones that have small builds like me. Fighters that are smaller.
I suppose that's the thing. When you think of sumo wrestlers, you think of these ginormous men. When actually, it's a sport, I suppose, for any body shape. These guys aren't huge, and they're competing.
They have to use their brain more and be technically perfect, as well as having a huge heart. There are lots of Mongolians succeeding in Japan, and they have made me believe that I too can become a successful fighter. But most of all, I look up to our champion, Asa Shoryu.
I assume it's a little bit like boxing in the sense that there's different weight classes. Well, a lot of sports, judo's the same, for example. There's different weight classes. So I assume it's the same. It's the same with sumo, and the fact that everyone can participate at a different level.
I really like watching all the Mongolian Rikishi in Japan and trying to copy their techniques. As a youngster trying to become a champion wrestler, it's great to see Mongolians winning all the time. One day, I want to follow the other Mongolians to Japan and be a champion, like Asa Shoryu.
Mongolian-born wrestlers make up the biggest international contingent in professional sumo, with over 30 now earning a living in Japan. That number is expected to keep on rising over the next few years, with the number of young Mongolians moving to Japan increasing.
How cool is that, earning a living being a sumo wrestler?
Mongolians first went to sumo stables in Japan, like this one, in the early 1990s after the fall of communism. Aware that wrestling was a national obsession amongst Mongolians, the sumo authorities invited several young wrestlers to move to Japan and study the sport. Their aim was to make sumo more global and more competitive, and they saw Mongolia as the perfect place to find new talent.
Jesus.
Mongolian wrestlers' success in Japan has undoubtedly been helped by their passion for traditional wrestling. Bayar Saikhan is a former Mongolian champion who also tasted success in amateur sumo, winning silver medals at 2 world championships. He's also the man who introduced us Shoryu to sumo.
This style of wrestling definitely seems similar to judo, for sure. Similar
But if you've
grappling.
grown up wrestling, you can wrestle in any style. And that's the main reason why Mongolian wrestlers have done so well in Japan, because to us wrestling is as natural as walking. I think that in wrestling an athlete needs just 1% talent. The remaining 99% is sheer hard work. But that 1% is still the most important element.
The success and popularity that sumo now enjoys in Mongolia is such that it might be seen as a threat to Mongolian wrestling. But Bayar Saikhan, who trains youngsters in the traditional form, thinks the two styles can coexist.
In Mongolia we just love wrestling, whether it's sumo or Mongolian wrestling. Of course the money you can earn in sumo is going to attract lots of youngsters, but our culture will never die. In fact, I think that our success in Japan has increased the popularity of our wrestling, as everyone knows that traditional wrestling is the basis for their success.
21-year-old Haku...
That's interesting, the fact that although they realised that a lot more people want to become sumos in Mongolia, actually when these Mongolian sumo wrestlers go over to Japan, I assume what he's saying is it's only an assumption, but the Japanese audience are then doing their research and actually looking more into the Mongolian wrestling. I assume.
Kuho is being tipped as Mongolia's next sumo superstar. He's already reached the rank of Sekewake, the third highest in the sport, and is expected to join Shoryu as a yokozuna in the next few years.
When he first got to the highest division judo.
There are two reasons why the pressure on Hakuho to succeed is high. His considerable talent as a wrestler is one, but his father is another. Monkbat was one of Mongolia's most successful traditional wrestlers.
I was one of 7 boys that went to Japan to join a stable when I was still quite young. It's thanks to my father that I've achieved what I have so far. He's supported me and he's believed in me, even when I didn't necessarily believe in myself.
He used to look at sumo magazines when he was about 5 years old. Then he'd say he wanted to become a big famous sumo wrestler, just like the ones in the pictures. I really wanted him to take up judo, but he was never interested. Instead, he'd just carry on talking about sumo. When I asked him why, he told me it was because he was so small, and he wanted to become as big as the sumo wrestlers in the magazines.
Hakuho needs to record 13 wins in a single tournament to earn promotion to the rank of Ozeki. Although that's his main target for this year, his long-term goals are a lot more ambitious.
That's interesting in the fact that what he's saying is they've got, in one tournament, they've got to get a certain amount of wins. Is their progress the same as like the ranking system of tennis and snooker and whatnot, where the more you win, the higher up the rank? I assume so.
Strength and technique are improving all the time. I'm determined to get better and better and stay injury-free. Hopefully, soon I'll join Shoryu and become a yokozuna.
Mongolians have only been participating in Japan's national sport for just over a decade, but in that time the impact that they've had has been remarkable. With the popularity of sumo growing all the time in a country so passionate about wrestling, don't be surprised to see many more Mongolian yokozunas in the near future.
How cool is that? I like these stories where a sport is giving people the inspiration and the hope to, I don't know, better themselves and better their families. In a sense, it's a wonderful story. I did watch Paul Hollywood, the baker. He did a fantastic series recently. I think it was on Channel 4, where he goes over to Japan, and obviously he's focused on food. But one of the places he goes was a sumo school, and he cooks for them. But he watches and sees, and it seems very intense. A lot of hard work for these big guys. There's a lot of eating, a lot of training. And so yeah, I recommend giving that a watch if you've got access to Channel 4. Really, really good show. And it was really interesting to look at the lifestyles of these training sumo wrestlers. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed. If there's any other weird sports, I say this is weird, it's not weird, but any more unique, lesser known sort of sports you want to recommend that I watch, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to share, subscribe, give me some more comments. I love them all, and I try to respond to as many as possible. Anyway, I'll see you next time.